everybody. So Geshe, thank you so much for your time with us. We know it's very busy, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. And this is the main group is the Lamrim study group. They have been studying for almost 2 years now, and but then it's open for everyone. And então eu preciso só que para todas as pessoas que essa vai ser uma tradução simultânea. Então vocês precisam ir no globo interpretação ou interpretation e escolher português ou inglês se você quiser escutar o Geshe diretamente, ou português que a Venerável Tenzin Kongsan vai estar traduzindo.
Okay, thank you.
So, Geshe, we like just to make the mandala offerings in the beginning.
Okay.
Neil?
Saji Oki Shukshi Meto Tram Rira Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kani Ratayami.
So,
vamos fazer o refúgio. Vamos fazer o refúgio em tibetano. Sangye Chodan Tsoki Chomala Chanchu Padu Dani Katsushi Lagi Jisho Hipye Tsonanki Yola Penche Sangye Lupasho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonala Chanchu Badu Dani Ketsushi Tagi Shunye Gipe Tsonenki Yola Penche Sangye Lupasho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonala Chanchu Badu Dani Katsushi Nagi Lincho Nige Pitsonanki Yola Penche Sangye Lupasho.
So, good evening. Is good evening there? I guess so.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for joining and giving your precious time. And I'm very pleased and happy to meet all of you by virtually. And so, as most of you are aware, today's topic is what is known as 12 dependent link. And it comes through, a few different sutras. There's one very famous and important sutra, the teaching by the Buddha himself, is called Rice Seedling Sutra. And in that, Buddha explained about the dependent arisings. And how all phenomena, how everything is dependent arising, how everything exists by depending on other cause, condition, and factors, how nothing exists independently. And so, while he was gazing on the rice field, then he holds a one rice seedling, and he's explained, because of arising of this, that arises. And because of these productions, that is being produced. And whoever understands that dependent arising, then that individual or persons understand the Dharma. And whoever understands the Dharma, then one achieves enlightenment. And then sutra is basically communications between Shariputra and Bodhisattva Maitreya. So then, Shariputra asks Maitreya, to elaborate on what Buddha has said earlier. And so that is about the teachings. And so first, when Buddha explained, because of this arises, that arises, so by holding the wrestling, so he's talking about the external, environmental and external dependent arisings. Because of the rice seed, then rice sprout arises. And because of the sprout, then the leaf arises. And because of the leaf, then stem arises. And because of the stem, then the flowers. And because of the flower, the fruit arises. So how one cause and conditions lead to the next effect and result, how each result come through by depending on previous cause and conditions. And then because of these productions that is being produced, then not only the environment and external conditions are dependent arising, but the internal world, the internal conditions, the internal world is also being produced by internal cause and conditions. And that, so when he talked about, so then that is where he talked about, you know, the dependent arisings of sentient beings' existence and experiences, you know. So we as a sentient beings, living beings, nobody wants suffering. Someone who is in good state of mind, nobody wants suffering. We all try to avoid suffering. Despite we do not want suffering, and we try to avoid the suffering and cause of suffering, but it seems suffering is unavoidable at this point. Is kind of part of our life, which no matter how we try to avoid it, still we experience a lot of difficulties, pain, suffering, physically, emotionally, mentally in our life, you know. Despite we do not want, you know, we don't want to get old, you know, aging. We don't want sickness, but, you know, we experience suffering, sickness, the suffering of sickness time to time. We do not want to die, but we cannot stop. We cannot avoid that. One day we have to face that reality. So why is that? We do not want all of that. We do not want sickness. We do not want aging. We do not want death. And we try all our best to avoid all of that. We try to escape from all of that, but we are unable. You know, and such the suffering of sickness, aging, and death does not come from nowhere. It comes from its cause and conditions. It comes from its cause and conditions. Those suffering has its cause and conditions. And what is that cause and conditions of such the suffering of sickness, aging, and death? Because of our samsaric birth. As long as we have samsaric birth, then some samsaric birth that has been produced by contaminated actions or karma and the delusions, then we cannot escape the sufferings. The suffering is byproduct of such rebirth or birth. It is part of the package. If you don't want that suffering, then we have to get rid of that samsaric birth. That is the product of the afflicted emotions or delusions and the contaminated karma. And so therefore, you know, because of the aging and death, the suffering of aging and death comes from the samsaric birth. And that samsaric birth comes through the existence, the 10th link. And that existence will come later, come because there's a grasping. And that grasping arises because of the craving. And that craving arises because there is a samsaric feeling. And that feeling, because there's a samsaric feeling, because our consciousness come into contact with the objects, the contact. And there is a contact because there is a sense faculty or sense power. The consciousness, through the sense faculties, come into contact with the objects because of through that sense faculties. And that sense faculties develop because of name and form. And that the name and form arises because of consciousness, and the consciousness arises because of the karma, or compositional actions or karma, the contaminated karma, and that arises because of the ignorance. So those are the 12 links. So basically, if you go further and further, the cause of the unwanted suffering of such as sickness, aging and death, and all other suffering that comes, it goes back to the fundamental ignorance. That is the evolutions of, the 12 link and our sufferings. And so that is basically the 12 link, okay? If you go backwards, and then if you go from, then because of ignorance, then compositional actions or karma is created. Because of the karma, then the karmic imprint is left within the consciousness. Third one, and because of the consciousness, then there is the name and form. Because there is a name and a form, then there is the 6 senses. Because of the 6 senses, then contact comes. Because contact, feeling comes. Because of feeling, then craving. Because of craving, grasping arises. From the grasping, existence arises. From the existence, then birth, and from the birth, aging and death. So, so if you want to get rid of the suffering, if we do not want the suffering, such as, the suffering of sickness, aging, death, and all other suffering that come in between, from the birth until the death, physical suffering, mental, emotional pain and suffering, if we don't want that, then we have to stop the samsaric rebirth. In order to stop the samsaric rebirth, we have to stop the contaminated karma and the delusions. And if you want to, the way to stop the contaminated karma and delusion by stopping the root of that, the fundamental ignorance. And so when we overcome the fundamental ignorance, then we can stop the delusion and karma, contaminated karma arising from that. And then when there's no more karma and delusion, then there's no more samsara rebirth. When there's no more samsara rebirth, then there's no more suffering. And that is how we end the suffering permanently. At the moment, we try to end the suffering, but we cannot end the suffering permanently, It's like treating a symptom instead of treating the illness itself. Because of certain illness, I might have fever as a symptom. Or, I might have a fever, I might have a headache. So then I take some medication for headache or fever. It goes away for a while, but it comes back until you solve the illness itself, because it is just a symptom, not the actual illness, not the actual problem itself. And the way we are dealing with our pain and suffering at the moment is just like trying to cure the symptom and not really go to the very root of that problem. And that is why we feel we solve the problem, then again, the problem arises in a different way, similar or slightly different way. It never ends. It never ends. Because we don't go to the very root of that, all the pain, all the suffering, all the problem. And here, the Buddha is saying the very root of all this suffering, all the problem, is our own afflictive emotion or delusions and our own contaminated karma. And the very root of those, that is the fundamental ignorance. So maybe we can talk a little bit about each of 12 links briefly. We don't have time to go very detailed each of them, but we can just kind of first, the ignorance. When you talk about ignorance, there are billions of ignorance, in our mind, or at least in my mind, there are so many ignorance, but here we are talking about fundamental ignorance, which is the very root of all the suffering, all the problems. So the fundamental ignorance is not just not understanding the reality, but is misperceiving the reality. It's much more stronger. Not understanding itself is ignorance, but misperceiving reality is much more stronger ignorance. Okay? And the ignorance here is misperceiving the reality, because even though reality is, empty of inherent existence, even though it's a dependent arisings, but we misperceive self and phenomena to exist inherently. And that is the ignorance. Due to our past imprint, when our mind come into the contact with the objects, the object appear to exist inherently from its own side, by its own objectively, from its own side. Not only there's that appearance, then we actually apprehend or misapprehend the things to exist, the object to exist inherently or existing by its own side. So then there is strong grasping, because we believe that object to exist by its own side inherently, then there is strong grasping to it. Through that strong grasping, then many other afflictive emotions arises. And so here we can talk, I don't know, maybe okay. When you talk about cause, we can talk about ignorance as the motivations of the causal motivation, resultant motivations. The causal motivations is always that fundamental ignorance that we talk about. The ignorance that is a grasping inherently or truly exists of the objects. And then all resultant motivations, like when I'm, let's say I'm engaged in the act of lying, okay? So causal motivation is that fundamental ignorance, and resultant, just before I'm lying, or at the time of lying, the ignorance of not understanding or the law of cause and effect. So, thinking that if I lie, it wouldn't have any consequences. Due to not understanding the negative consequences of lying, so therefore that moment you have the motivation to lie, and that lie is driven by that ignorance of not understanding the cause of the law of cause and effect, the karma. And so due to the ignorance of law of cause and effect, then we create negative karma to take rebirth in the lower rebirth. And due to the ignorance, the fundamental ignorance of reality, then we create contaminated karma, and then we take rebirth within the higher rebirth, but within the samsara. So I think with that maybe ignorance, maybe if you have some questions, I will take later, you know. But I think at the moment, I think yeah. I don't know. I think yeah, I think maybe it might be useful to explain. Let's just check with one thing, you know, when we have strong sense of self, I or me, you know, especially when someone criticizes you, or when you feel you are being insulted, you know, humiliated, abused, you know, or when you have strong sense of fear, something's going to happen to me, you know. When that, then there is strong sense of me or I, and if you really watch, you know, how does at that moment the sense of me or I appear to your mind? You know, if you observe with your mindfulness, you realize that, you know, there's sense of independent or inherently existing self, or the self or I that exists by its own power or by its own side. First, there's that appearance, you know, truly or inherently existing self. And not only there's that appearance, the next, immediately your mind apprehends and grabs as the self to be inherently existing or truly existing, it appear to you. Existing from, you know, there's real I, there's real or truly existing I. And so when you have that sense, then you believe that, and then you have strong grasping of that, very strong grasping of that, to that self, very strong grasping to that self. And when you have that strong grasping to that self, then you start to have sense of, you know, cherishing or that self. That strong grasping of the self leads you to strongly, openly cherishing yourself. Or in other way, you started to feel a strong attachment to that self and cherish very strongly about that. Once we have that strongly cherishing that, overly cherishing that, and strong attachment to that self, then, you know, whatever you feel, any objects or anyone that will benefit and that will help, that will give a happiness to that self, then you start to have attachment towards those objects. Because we feel that object will help that self that you are cherishing and attached to very strongly. That object will help. That object will give you happiness. That object will benefit you. So then you start to have a strong attachment towards those objects, strong clinging towards those objects. That is how attachment arises towards certain objects. And the moment you feel certain objects that will not benefit you, that will, you know, harm you, that will give you a suffering, then you started to have disliking towards those objects, aversion towards those objects. And sense of sometimes anger towards those objects. So, aversions, dislike, anger arises. And so it all arises from that ignorance. So anger, attachment, anger arises. And because of the anger and attachment, then we engage into certain actions, either through mental actions or verbal actions or physical actions, or two of them or all of them, and through that, then we create the karma. Through that, then we create the karma. The negative karma due to the delusions. And because of those negative karma, then we experience suffering as a consequence of those negative karma or those negative actions. So with that, I think it is important for us to really, not because Buddha said it, okay? Of course, in the Buddha's teaching, Buddha says all the sufferings come from our own karma and our own delusions, and our delusion karma coming from the ignorance. While the Buddha explained that in a scripture, but we have to understand that through our own observation when we have those, when you have angry, when you have anger arises or attachment arises, you try to look, where does that anger arises from? Where does that attachment arises from? If you see it, the attachment arises because there is a sense of, belief that objects will make us happy. That object will give up something. That object will make this self, make me happy or support me, help me, whatever. And when you have anger, you see it because we are fearful of that object, because we feel that maybe that object will make us unhappy, bring us pain and suffering and so forth. And where does that come from? Those fabricating minds, whether it is helpful, whether it is painful, whether it's going to help us, whether it's going to make us unhelpful. Those minds come on the basis of that strong grasping of that inherent existing self, and strongly, overly cherishing and being attached to that self. And overly cherishing and attachment to the self comes because we believe there is an inherently, truly existing self as it appears. So it is important to observe, check our mind and see how they are related, how ignorance lead to the delusions, other delusions, how other delusions arises because of that ignorance, how that ignorance give rise to the delusions, and how delusions arises from that ignorance is very important to understand with our own experience by observing our own emotions, our own feelings, our own thoughts, so that your understanding, not in just scriptural, but your understanding become experiential. And then you say, oh, now I see what the Buddha said. It is my experience. It's not like it was some experience and I don't have same experience. Now you understand, oh, the Buddha said our delusion arises from the ignorance, and I can see my own experience, how the delusions are arising because of the ignorance, how the ignorance and giving rise to those delusions. Then when you have that understanding, then your understanding become profound and unshakable. you know. So that is the fundamental ignorance. And second one, so that is the ignorance, the first one. And because of ignorance here, the compositional actions or karma, you know. So due to the ignorance, then, you know, one of the delusions arises. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's attachment, sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes it's a sense of unhealthy pride or arrogant, you know, sometimes it's all those different state of mind, afflictive state of mind or delusions arises. And due to those delusions, then we engage into the actions. You know, we engage into the actions. When we say actions, of course, it can have actions of physical actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. So because of, you know, anger, then sometimes we have ill will feeling. Due to the anger, we have ill will feeling, wanting to hurt others, wanting to harm others, ill will feeling. That's mental actions. Once anger arises, then you, because of your anger, you want to hurt that person back. You want to give that person pain. You have that ill will feeling. That is mental actions. Sometimes we have that ill will feeling, but maybe we will not say anything or will not physically act. Sometimes we have that ill will feeling and then we act with our speech. We use harsh words. So that is physical, verbal actions. And sometimes not only we use harsh word, then maybe physically, maybe we can hit someone, become a violent. And that is physical actions. So, you know, it due to the one of those delusion arising, then we can engage into the actions, either in all three doors, through all the three doors, or two doors or one doors, you know. Either way, so through that, engage in that actions, then we create what we call karma, or the actions. And once we create the actions karma, so that is the second link, okay? The compositional actions or the karma, that's the second link. And once we have created that actions, karma, that very moment, it leaves imprint. That actions plant or leave imprint in our consciousness of that actions. So it's like, you know, the moment you walk on the sand, okay, in the beach, you know, I think in Brazil you have a lot of beach, you know, so maybe you must be walking by the beach. When you are walking by the beach, the moment you make a step, footprint is left there. Each time you walk, footprint is left there. Same with each time we create any actions through any of the door, like the footprint, the print of that actions is left in the consciousness. The imprint is left in that consciousness. So that consciousness carry that imprint, you know, and that is why, you know, like in different human beings, we see, you know, some human beings, even maybe they have not trained so much in this life. Naturally, their personality from very young age, you know, some of children, they get very easily irritated, easily get upset and angry, even with small things. And some others, even with the big problems, they don't get so irritated. They don't lose their mind. They can still be a calm, peaceful. because of why is that different response? Why is that one person making so irritated, even with the small things, and another person's, even a big problem, they can still keep calm, peace, and not easily disturbed. You know, even from a young age, sometimes you can see difference among the different people, how they respond, even without training, and that is from their imprint from the past. You know, if you have a strong imprint of anger from the past, then, you know, in this, even that, you know, imprint is there, and so therefore, even when small things happen, it can make you very upset, irritated, angry easily. Whereas you don't have that strong imprint of anger. Instead, you have a strong imprint of love and compassion. Then, you know, even some bad things happen, even someone is mean and nasty, still you can keep your mind undisturbed, unirritated, calm, peaceful. And that is because of imprint. So imprint has a strong effect in our mind, how we respond. Imprint from the past, imprint from this life. So that is third one, consciousness. The consciousness that carry all the imprint. The moment we create the actions, that very moment, the imprint or predispositions of that actions is be planted into the consciousness that carry. And then due to the consciousness, then, you know, the consciousness connect from one life to another life. You know, when we die, you know, then we leave the body. The bodies might be cremated or buried, whatever we do with the body. But our consciousness will continue. From Buddhist point of view, consciousness will continue from one life to another life, carrying all this imprint. And so, as we enter the mother's womb, is the consciousness that connect, you know, with the new life in the mother's womb. And the moment, you know, we conceive in the mother's womb, through the consciousness, that consciousness, then the fourth, the name and form is produced. So here, the name and form means the five aggregates. The form refers to physical aggregate, and the name referring to the four mental aggregates. The feeling, the aggregate of feeling, the aggregate of discriminating mind, and the aggregate of compositional factors and consciousness. So then the name and the form is produced. And as once name and form is produced, then gradually our body started to develop. You know, then as our body, after the moment from the conceptions in our mothers, the moment we have the conception in mother, from that moment, then day by day, week by week, month by month, then, you know, your body develop. The body of the child develop. Through the development of the child, the six senses started to develop. Our eye senses, you know, the hearing senses, the smelling senses, the tasting sense faculty of power, you know, the feeling, bodily feeling or sensations, bodily feelings, sense power, and then, and then phenomena, senses, So those five, six senses are developed over the time. And once the six senses are developed, because we already have the consciousness is already being developed. The consciousness is there. The moment you have the name and form, that very moment you have the consciousness, because you have the five aggregates. And then with the time, the six senses develop. So now there's a consciousness, there is the six senses, and then there is the objects. Then now you have the ability, your consciousness have the ability to come in contact with the objects. For example, eye consciousness. The eye consciousness that's perceiving the flower. The flower is there. The object, the flower is there. The mind consciousness that can perceive the flower is there. But before, you don't have the eye senses is not developed. So when your eye sense is not developed, your consciousness cannot, your eye consciousness cannot come in contact with the object. But once you have the eye sense faculty developed, through the eye sense faculty, then your consciousness is able to come in contact with the object and perceive the objects. So come into the contact with the objects. Now your sense and consciousness are able to come into the sense consciousness, and the consciousness are able to come in contact. When you have contact, maybe So in a way, the way we can understand is the six senses are like, in a laboratory, or you try to look for small things because your naked eye consciousness, your naked eye cannot see, so you use the what do you call that?
Microscope.
Microscopes. Thank you. You use the microscope to see the small objects. The microscope helps us to see the object that you cannot see. Same way, the sense faculty or sense power are like the microscope that allow your consciousness to come in contact with the objects. And when there is some damage to your sense faculty, sense power, then your consciousness is unable to come in contact with the objects. So that is why when someone has damage to their eye senses, then even they have the consciousness, they cannot see. They cannot see it because there is a damage to the eye sense faculties or sense power. And same with the hearing, smelling, tasting, bodily sensations or feel, so same. And when you come into contact with the objects, then, we are able to distinguish. Having come in contact with the object, then you distinguish, oh, this object is pleasant, desirable. This object is unpleasant, undesirable. This object is so. Once you come in contact with the objects, then that is where, we started to have this kind of mind, distinguishing or discriminating. Oh, this is good. This is nice. This is what I like. This is delicious. Or, this is horrible. This is, I don't like. This is undesirable, bad. Or this is so and so, neutral, more neutral. It's not bad, it's not good, so and so. And once we distinguish the object in that way, then different feeling arises. The next one, feeling. the feeling arises. Once we come into contact with the objects, then feeling arises. And of course, again, there is a different feeling, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neutral feelings. And what kind of feeling arises depend on the distinguish you make when you come into contact with the objects. Once you say it's nice and desirable, then, pleasant feeling arises. Pleasant feeling arises, Once you make distinguish the objects as a bad, horrible, unpleasant, undesirable, then bad, unpleasant feeling arises when you come in contact with that object. Unpleasant feeling arises. And when we distinguish the objects, it's not desirable, neither undesirable, neither pleasant, neither more kind of neutral, so, then also in relation to that, also our feeling, neutral feeling arises. More kind of neutral feeling arises. Can you see the connections when with the objects, how different feeling arises because we have kind of distinguished the object differently in that categories, and how we distinguish those objects in different categories when we come in contact with the objects. So I think, it is very important for us to really trying to understand with our own experience, with our own experience, how once we come to contact, then how we distinguish the object, and once we distinguish the object differently, how different feeling arises. So then, once we understand, then the teachings does not become just a kind of philosophical, it becomes experiential. It is not just a theory, but it's, something tangible with our own experience. Then once you have the feelings arising, then the next one, craving arises, So once we have a desirable feelings, pleasant feelings, you like, having come in contact with the objects, and then, we distinguish, this is a nice, good, desirable, and then nice feeling arises, good feeling arises, pleasant feeling arises. And once we have that pleasant feeling, then we don't want to lose that feeling. We get attached to it. The problem is that, because we haven't abandoned the attachment and the delusion, we still have delusions. So once that feeling arises, then we have attachment to that feeling. We want to feel that feeling all the time. We don't want to lose that feeling or feeling. We don't want to, lose that feeling. And when we lose that, then we become miserable because you don't have the same feeling. I wish I had the same feeling that I had yesterday, the pleasant feeling, nice feeling. And then our life become unhappy, miserable, because we started to miss something because we wish I could have that feeling, and it's not more there anymore. That miserable feeling, unhappy feeling comes because you are attached to that feeling, the pleasant feeling. If you are not attached to that, even it is not there anymore, you wouldn't feel miserable and unhappy or miss it so much. So from that attachment, from the feeling, that's where attachment arises. Attachment is the mind, that hold the object very tightly, and not wanting to let it go, you know. And when it is taken away, then it becomes miserable. It's like a child who is very attached to their toy, and if you take away their toy or their, you know, video game, they will be so unhappy. Well, I think not only child, we, you know, if someone take away our phone for a while, you know, we might also just be like a child as well, you know. Why? Because we are addicted to that. We are so attached to it. So the addictions, which is part of attachment, you know, because of that. In many of the teachings, in some of the teachings, you know, they describe attachments like, you know, there are many different examples they give. One of the examples is like attachment is, you know, like a honey. That honey that has been annoyed on the shaft, something sharp, you know, like a knife. You know, so if you started to lick honey on the sharp knife, at the very beginning is sweet, and then it will cut your tongue. So that is attachment. At the very beginning, it seems, it feels like very nice, sweet, pleasant. But in the end, it gives you pain, suffering, and miserable. Just like being cut, your tongue. Isn't that so true? You know, our attachment, the more attachment, the stronger attachment, the intense attachment we have, whether it is a person, whether it is an animal, whether it is any kind of object, when we lose them, there's so much pain. There's so much pain. There's so much, you know, unhappiness, grief, overwhelmed by grief and pain so much. If you don't have so much attachment, of course you will feel the loss of someone dear, and you will still sad, but it will not be so miserable, as miserable. But when you have strong attachment, then definitely, you know, it hurts you more than what it really gives. And attachment is a definitely distorted mind. Distorted mind in the sense it is not up to the reality. The attachment exaggerates more quality into the object than that is there. You know, let's say whatever object we are attached to, if there is some goodness in that object, the percentage of goodness in that object might be 10%, 20%. But when you have attachment, we exaggerate as 100% more. Our attachment exaggerate more positive quality into the object of our attachment than actually there is. And when our attachment decreases, then you begin to see the reality more. And you feel like you have been deceived. Do you get it? Because before you thought, when you are so attachment, you thought the good qualities are 100%. Now you begin to see only 50% or not even less than 50%. And you feel like that object had deceived you, but actually it hasn't deceived you. It was how it is, but your attachment made you blinded to see that one. And your attachment kind of exaggerated more quality into that. Interesting, isn't it? And that is what also anger does. Anger exaggerates more negative qualities more than what is there in the objects. They both exaggerate more quality into the object. One, more anger exaggerate more negative qualities into the object. Attachment exaggerate more positive qualities into the objects. And both of them are far from the reality. Totally distorted mind, totally, mistaken mind. So that is the attachments, the 8th link. And once you have attachments, and then when we don't work with that, and when you don't try to reduce it, then that attachment become more stronger, intense, and bigger, So you're holding the object tightly become more stronger, more intense, more longer durations. And that one's grasping, when your attachment become much more stronger. And of course, there are different grasping, grasping to this, desire objects such as form, sound, smells, taste, and touchable object and so forth, grasping to the, wrong views, grasping to, improper behavior and moralities, and so there are 4 different type of grasping, so attachments so lead to that kind of grasping when your grasping gets stronger. And when this attachment and grasping come together, then it activates the seed that is left in the consciousness from the past. So this attachment and grasping is like watering the seed. When you water the seed, then the seed started to grow into the plant, sprout, and then slowly, stems, flowers, and that it grows. So what activates our karmic seed from the past is that attachment and grasping. And when that karmic seed has been activated by that attachment and grasping, then that seed has fully, activated to produce the result immediately. That become existing or becoming, the 10th one. The 10th, becoming existing, is like when the seed has been fully activated through water, fertilizers, light, heat, and so forth. So it's like the next moment, the sprout is about to come from that seed. Do you get it? All the conditions come together. Now the next moment is the sprout coming from that seed, ready to come. The 10th, the existence becoming, is that state when it is all the conditions come together, ready to produce that sprout immediately, the next moment. And that is when, at the time of death, the last moment before our next birth, that kind of craving and grasping would activate the karmic seed of next rebirth. And then it make that ready to produce the next rebirth, and then next is then the birth. The 11th is the birth, samsaric birth. So birth is, of course, the newly born child from the mother's womb. And once we have that kind of samsaric rebirth, that is a result of our contaminated karma, and the delusions, ignorance, and that has been activated by grasping and craving. When we have that kind of birth, then we cannot escape the suffering. Then we cannot escape the suffering. And then, in terms of human, then we have, aging, the suffering of aging, every suffering of death, and suffering of sickness, and all other different sufferings that we mentioned before. And so that is the 12th link. So that is how our suffering come into the existence. Why we suffer. We want to know why we are suffering, isn't it? We always want to know why we are suffering. Nobody wants suffering, but we suffer. Why do we suffer? Why do we have to suffer? And normally we try to find, oh, I'm suffering because you did this, or because you said that, or because I didn't get that one. We only look for external conditions. But here, even though external condition play a certain role and contributes a little bit, but it is our internal conditions that is the main cause of our sufferings. Is our internal conditions, cause and conditions, such as our own karma, our own state of mind, emotions, that play the biggest role in our suffering. And that one's very clear, because when we look, we try to solve a lot of problems by solving the external factors, by clearing some of the external factors, but still we suffer. Because we haven't cleared the internal cause and conditions. So when you see that all this link, how our sufferings come from the samsaric birth, and then how each of that come from existence and grasping, attachments, feelings, contact, six senses, name and form, consciousness, and karma, and the ignorance. How everything is rooted in that ignorance. Then we begin to see, oh, if I can only get rid of that ignorance, I can get rid of all these other problems. So the key is overcoming and getting rid of that fundamental ignorance. And when we understand that, then we begin to think, we begin to feel, liberation is possible. Do you get it? Sometimes we feel liberation not possible. It feels too far away. It feels like abstract, something abstract. Something so far away, something impossible. But once we understand how it comes from that root fundamental ignorance, and how, if we can overcome that fundamental ignorance, then we can overcome all other 11 link, and thereby overcome all the sufferings. Because sometimes we feel, when you talk about delusions, we have so much delusions. It feels like, how can I overcome them? I have so much anger. I have so much attachment. I have so much, kind of greediness, or miserliness, or jealousy, or pride, and all. And it feels like it's overwhelming. It seems like it might take all my life to overcome one of those delusions, isn't it? Just to overcome attachment, it seems like it is going to take me whole lifetime. Another lifetime to overcome the anger. Another lifetime to overcome the kind of jealousy, another lifetime to overcome the sense of arrogance, the pride, and all, you know. But when you understand here what you know, that all these different delusions in a Buddhist psychologist or Buddhist study of the mind, where they talk about 6 root delusions and 21 secondary delusions, all these different delusions, even though there are so many different delusions, they all are rooted in that fundamental ignorance. They all comes, manifest, and arise from that fundamental ignorance. If we can overcome that fundamental ignorance, we automatically overcome all other delusions. And therefore, then you can see, you know, only if I can overcome that fundamental ignorance. And then when you see that, then you see, oh, you know, liberation, nirvana might not be too far away. You know, we begin to see it is possible. It's not something possible. We begin to see it's not just an abstract ideas, but something personal, something possible. Is important to really feel that, you know, liberation is possible. If you see it is possible, then it gives you more inspirations, more energies to practice. If you don't see it's possible, then, you know, then it doesn't give you so much inspiration, so much energy to practice. But when you see it's possible, is within, is something that you can touch on, something possible, then definitely, you know, that will give us a lot of energy and confidence, energy, you know, encouragement, and so forth. And I think so in terms of completing the 12th set of the link of one set of one dependent link, for example, you know, maybe I create a course to take a birth in either one of the lower realm or one of the higher rebirth, whatever, and then due to that ignorance, then I engage into a certain, let's say maybe I create a karma to take a rebirth as a dog in next lifetime, okay? Through the ignorance, then I engage in certain actions and create certain karma to be born as a dog, and that karmic seed is left within the consciousness, okay? Then at the time of death, that karmic seed is activated by craving and grasping. Craving and grasping. That karmic seed to be born as a dog is be activated by the craving and grasping. You know. And that kind of craving and grasping can come in many different forms, you know. Maybe, you know, at the time of death, of course, some people, you know, sometimes they have thoughts, you know, wanting to come as different animals, you know. I wish I can come as a, you know, eagle that I can fly, you know. Some people feel that way, you know. Some people feel I wish I would come as a dolphin. It looks, you know. So some people have that kind of, so there is a little bit of kind of attachment even there. And then of course at the time of them, you have that strong wish or strong attachment to be born as that. Then of course that is quite easy, craving and grasping, activating that seed. But even someone who doesn't have that kind of normal in our life, we don't want to come as an animal, maybe we want to come as a human beings, But at the time of death, sometimes we can have certain visions, where you are being chased by, let's say, another animal, lion, and then you see your dog protecting you, and then you can get attached to the dog. Because you see in that vision, because of that, so that you can have an attachment to the dog, and that the attachment comes, and then that lead to the grasping, and that through that, then it can activate in a death. And sometimes, it can be in, you might have another visions or dream or in visions, you might be kind of running, or you might be chased by something, and then you kind of feel like there's a place where maybe there is a dog place, and you want to kind of save yourself in that. And then again, that can be so it can be activated, the attachment and grasping in many different forms. It can come, and that can activate the seed. And then once it is activated, then existence or becoming is produced. And then next life, then the moment you enter your consciousness, enter the dog's womb, mother's womb, the moment you have the conceptions, then from that, then name and form and all other 6 resolve. Over the time, the 6 resolve you experience. So through that, then you experience the one set of link, such as to being born as a dog in 2 lifetimes. Sometimes it can be experienced in 3 lifetimes. And when it is 3 lifetimes, I create out of ignorance, I create the karma to be born as a dog, and then that karmic seed is left in the consciousness. And then at the time of death, maybe that karmic seed is not activated. Another karmic seed is being activated. Another karmic seed, let's say, to be born as a human being. I have also karmic seed to be as a human being. That has been activated by the attachment, grasping, and then existing. And then next, I experience the human life and all the result of human life. So, it could take 1 lifetime, many lifetimes, until that the karmic seed that is within consciousness to be born as a dog is being activated in one of future life, and then it is activated craving, grasping, and activated, and then you come to existence. And then it becomes 2 life, and then the next you take as a birth as a dog, and then you experience the result, the 7 results. So in that cases, it took 3 lifetime. So it can take 2 lifetime or 3 lifetime to complete one set of 12 dependent link. And the problem, the unfortunate is that, while we are experiencing the link of one of the set of one of the link, at the same time we are creating many other new links all the time. And so that is the unfortunate, while you are experiencing the result of previous karma, you are creating new karma continuously. And so that become almost endless, tiring, endless, until we stop the karma. And to stop the karma, we have to stop the delusions. To stop the delusions, we have to stop the fundamental ignorance. And to stop the fundamental ignorance, then we need to develop the wisdom relies on the ultimate truth or ultimate reality. that is the realizations of all the objects or phenomena or things to be exist, not realize, understanding or realizing they all are empty of inherent existence, empty of truly existence. And while it is empty of truly existent and eternally existent, at the same time, there is the appearance due to cause and conditions, and therefore it functions and it effects. So I think maybe with that, I think maybe I think we have what I think maybe 10 minutes questions. So please feel comfortable without any hesitation for any questions.
Let me try, Yuri, if I can open the microphone. Maybe the person can ask in Portuguese directly. Let's see how it works. Oi, Lana, boa noite. Se você quiser fazer em inglês e depois em português. A gente não te ouve. Você precisa, Ilana, ir no canal...
Sim, agora?
Tá.
Sim. Thank you, Geshe, very much for your teaching. I would like to ask you about the view of the transitory collection. If you could differentiate the grasping at I and the grasping at mine. Eu traduzo para o português, Nandro.
Por favor.
E o Geshe pode, por favor, diferenciar a visão da coleção, não sei como fala, The Transitory Collection, a visão dos agregados, quando a gente tem essa visão do eu e a visão do meu, né, de acordo com a ignorância.
So first of all, when we are talking about grasping, there's a grasping of the persons, and there's grasping, or maybe grasping of the ignorance and grasping the self or the persons, and then the ignorance and grasping phenomena. First, there's two, and therefore there is selfness of person and selfness of phenomena to encounter those two, ignorance and grasping. Then within the grasping of the self, within the grasping of the persons, then there's a grasping of the persons of, as you mentioned, transitory collections. And that is, grasping the self or mind as to exist inherently. So sometimes it is either is the self, grasping self as inherently or truly existence, or there's sense of mind, there's sense of mind and grasping that sense of mind as inherently or truly existence. And then of course there's sense of grasping ignorance of persons that is not that transitory collections. When I have grasping of you, another persons as inherently existence, when I have ignorance that is grasping another persons as inherent existence, that is a grasping of ignorance grasping inherent grasping the person, but is not the grasping of transitory collections. In order for the grasping of transitory collection, the object has to be either yourself or the mind of the self, mind. Okay, and whereas so grasping of the mind fall into the grasp, the ignorance and grasping phenomena. So because the mind is neither self or the so-called the mind. So therefore, the grasping of the mind is not a transitory grasping of transitory collection, but is a grasping of phenomena as inherent existence. So it falls into the grasping of phenomena, grasping inherent existence of the phenomena, the mind. And so I think, I don't know whether that was your questions, it cleared your questions or not, or whether you were, yeah?
Yeah, Geshe, so the view of the transitory collection is exclusively the I.
I, the object of that object is either I or mine. So when you say mine, we are not talking about the mind or the body or others. Once you say the body, your focus, once you emphasize, is on body. So I think when we say, let's say, my body, my mind, or my experience, grasping of that, when the emphasis is not on the body itself or the mind itself or the experience itself, but the emphasis of grasping is mine, then that is transitory collections. But when the emphasis goes, instead of mind, it goes to the body or the mind or experience, then it becomes the grasping of phenomena. Yeah, did you get it? So it depends on your the grasping mind, where it emphasizes when you're saying my body, my experience, my mind, whether the emphasis of that grasping also in the mind or whether it's on the body itself or the mind itself. So that makes slightly difference. Okay. Yes. Any other questions, please?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Hello, Geshe. Thank you for sharing your light with us tonight. My question is there a way for us to identify that one of our actions or our thoughts is feeding the seed of the fundamental ignorance?
Can you repeat again?
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a way for us to identify that our actions and our thoughts are watering, are feeding the seed of the fundamental ignorance?
Well, I think for us ordinary beings, it might not be so easy to identify them. What we can say is that when we have any kind of afflictive emotion or delusion arising, and when we, out of that, when we act, or whether when any positive thought arises, and when we act out of that positive thought, each of time, it does two things. One, it creates new positive karma or negative karma, depending on your state of mind and your actions. So either you create new positive karma and new negative karma. While it's creating new negative karma, at the same time, it can be activating the other seeds from the past. It does almost two jobs, Sometimes it does two jobs, depending on your the actions, So therefore, that is why the delusion are so destructive. Not only they are creating new negative karma, but also they are activating some of the previous karma as well, karmic seed, And so therefore, I think in general, I think that is, but I think it is not easy for us, for ordinary being, how my particular state of mind or how particular state of my actions is activating particular seeds, particular seed of, that is better hard for us to know. unless you have certain higher level realizations, maybe to be able to see past, futures. Once you have developed certain level of clairvoyance, or certain state of highly meditative state, then maybe you might be able to identify and see that. But I think for ordinary, it will be, we know that it is activating some previous karmic seed. We know it's creating new karmic seed, but it is hard to know what karmic seed I'm activating from the past and what exactly new karma I'm creating. Am I creating to be born as an animal, to be born as a human beings, or to do something else? All of that. Yeah. So if there is questions, I will take the last questions. And unfortunately, as much as I want to give more opportunity, but again, I have one class in 10-15 minutes. So.
Okay, Geshe, so we have 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Yes. Okay, please.
So very quickly, Neil asks the following. For many Dharma practitioners, these 12 links remain an elusive subject, something difficult to penetrate and even more difficult to relate to one's personal experience and daily practice. How can we, as ordinary beings, help these people?
I think even though maybe we cannot, each of 12 link might not be so clear to us, but at least we can have clarity of general of that, how our sufferings is coming from because of our samsaric birth, and how such samsaric birth is a result of our own actions, karma, and the delusions, and how karma and delusions, how karma is created because of the delusions, and how delusions arises on the basis of ignorance. I think if we have understanding of that in general, then I think, even we don't understand each of them so clearly, what the name and form and 6 senses and all of that, you have the general understanding of 12 link, even though you don't have the very precisely step by step, but I think you have general understanding, and I think that should be helpful and beneficial to us to see the importance of the need to deal with our mind and emotions and trying to reduce and overcome the afflictive emotions and the root of those afflictive emotions, the ignorance, and through that, then how we can change our karma, our actions. By changing our karma and actions, how we can change our rebirth, or how we can stop the samsaric rebirth, and having stopped the samsaric rebirth, how we can stop the suffering that comes because of samsaric rebirth. So I think that if we have that general understanding, I think that at the moment, I think that should be helpful to inspire us to practice the Dharma. Yeah.
Thank you. So last question.
Yes.
If we were able to access the Dharmakaya consciousness directly, even without purifying all of our negative karma, is there still a possibility for a rebirth?
No. Once we have access to the Dharmakaya, wisdom of the Buddhas, once we have overcome all the delusion, even before having access to Dharmakaya, even like I said, Arhat, when you are free from all the delusions, when you have overcome all the delusion, or when you, in terms of both sadhavas, when you achieve the Ed Bhumi, then you overcome all the delusions. And so even in that state, even there is negative karma that have not been purified, those negative karma cannot produce any result, but because there's no delusion to activate them. So it is a seed that will never get the water. Therefore, it cannot produce the sprout, the plant, because in order to, as we mentioned before, in order to have the samsara rebirth, it has to be activated with craving and grasping at the time of death. The seed has to be activated by the craving and grasping. If it doesn't have the water of craving and grasping, then the seed doesn't, even the seed is dead, it never get water, so it cannot produce the samsaric rebirth. So it cannot produce the existence and then the rebirth. So therefore, and that is the good side. I think that is the wonderful side is, even we might not have been able to purify all the negative karma, because maybe we might have so much, but if we can overcome the delusions, then you don't have to worry about that. It cannot produce any samsara rebirth. It cannot produce any of the pain, suffering of that, because it never get the water that activate by the craving and grasping. And so, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you do the dedication shortly?
Yes. Do you have? Oh, yeah.
Nos méritos dessas ações virtuosas, que eu rapidamente alcance o estado de um Guru Buda. Começar de novo. Pelos méritos dessas ações virtuosas, que eu possa rapidamente alcançar o estado de um Guru Buda e guie todos os seres viventes sem exceção a esse estado iluminado. Chanchu Sen, Chunri Poche, Makyapana, Kegishi, Kiwa, Napa, Mepaya, Gonego, Tupewashu, Tonita, Warin Poche, Makyapana, Kegishi, Kiwa, Napa, Mepaya, Gonego, Tupewashu.
I'm going to do the mandala offerings thinking in Portuguese, but then you'll be faster.
Okay, yeah.
Essa terra ungida com perfume coberta de flores, adornada com o monte, quatro continuos, o sol e a lua. Imagino tudo como um campo búdico puro e ofereço que todos os seres viventes desfrutem dessa terra pura. Que a vira de meu venerável lama seja firme, suas divinas ações brancas se espalhando nas 10 direções, que a tocha dos ensinamentos de Losam sempre permaneça, afastando a escuridão de todos os seres nos 3 reinos. Idan Guru Ratna Mandala Kaniratayami. Thank you so much, Geshe. Thank you so much, and hope to have other teachings with you. And also, when it's possible, Geshe comes to Brazil for us to have presence.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Thank you.